Mentor, not mentor.
Moderator.
Moderator.
I'll be the moderator, Mike. Today.
All right, go ahead.
Jai Baba.
All right,
Amma,
Jai
can
Baba.
you see the photograph?
Hello.
Photograph. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Kiran.
Oh, so I started sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
We can see Ravi Mai's. Ante we can see Ravi Mai in the video, but your slide is not visible, Kiran. Yes, now visible.
Now it's visible?
Yes.
Okay. So Jai Baba, everyone. Good evening, good morning. Today I will talk about the topic of an extract, a chapter from Meher Baba's Discourses, Volume 3, Chapter 2, called The Travail of the New World Order. And just for visual pleasure, some of you may have seen these pictures, but these are actually 2 years old. So there was actually, right after we left London, there was a drive, Meher Baba awareness drive in 2018. So this is from that. So I was looking for some pictures and I found these. So anyway, I thought I'd put those up, considering we are talking of the New World Order and, in terms of its modern relevance. So just a little bit of context for this topic. This is the second chapter from Volume 3 of Discourses. This is written by Baba Garu in 1941-42. It's important to note that this was written during World War II. So as we all know, this was a period of lot of strife and pain and suffering all around the world, and also in India, actually. India was a big participant in World War II, fighting obviously in terms of the British forces, but also it was a time when there was a lot of violence also within India. During the World War, there was also a period of drought. So it was a period of a lot of pain and suffering the world across, and it was obviously in the news those days. What is the meaning of travail? So just to start off, travail means painful or laborious effort. And it's not in the definition of the meaning of travail, but the context of that word is usually used where a lot of toil or labor is involved, and it is followed by some fruit of that labor, some benefit. Amma, you shared one video of the talks by from Hyderabad Center, I think. So that uncle was talking about travails and how he talks about the travail of a pregnant woman, and how she goes through labor and pain, and thereafter comes the baby, new life, right? So it's used in that context. So the word travail, it's very relevant as we read the chapter. It becomes relevant why that word is used, because there's something after, right? So that is something to keep in mind. This chapter follows chapter 1 in this volume 3, which is entitled Avatar. I will read obviously chapter 2 via the screen extracts, and there are some keywords that we pick up from it. After this chapter, just to give some context and some continuity, is the chapter entitled The Man God. And finally, I'll just share some other information, not from this chapter, obviously, but from the world around in terms of what is happening in terms of violence and what mankind's next challenges will be. Okay, so that will be the flow of today. So let me start off. I will just read. So this is the text. So the world storm, which has been gathering momentum, is now having its greatest outburst. And in reaching its climax, it will work universal disaster. In the struggle for material well-being, all grievances have assumed fantastic proportions, and the diverse differences of human interest have been so accentuated that they have precipitated distinctive conflict. Humanity has failed to solve its individual and social problems, and the evidence for this failure is very clear. The incapacity of men to deal with their problems constructively and creatively reveals a tragic deficiency in the right understanding of the basic nature of man and the true purpose of life. The world is witnessing an acute conflict between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. On the one hand, there are selfish persons who seek their happiness blindly through lust for power, unbridled greed, and unrelieved hatred. Ignorant of the real purpose of life, they have sunk down to the lowest level of culture. They bury their higher selves in the wreckage of crumbling forms which linger on from the dead past. Bound by material interests and limited conceptions, they are forgetful of their divine destiny. They have lost their way, and their hearts are torn by the ravages of hate and rancor. On the other hand, there are persons who unveil their inherent higher selves through the endurance of pain and deprivation and through noble acts of bravery and self-sacrifice. The present war is teaching man to be brave, to be able to suffer, and to understand and to sacrifice. The need for cure of selfishness. The disease of selfishness in mankind will need a cure, which is not only universal in its application, but drastic in its nature. It is so deep-rooted that it can be eradicated only if it is attacked from all sides. Real peace and happiness will dawn spontaneously when there is a purging of selfishness. The peace and happiness which come from self-giving love are permanent. Even the worst sinners can become great saints if they have the courage and sincerity to invite a drastic and complete change of heart. The present chaos and destruction will engulf the whole world, but this will be followed by a very long period in which there shall be no war. The passing suffering and miseries of our times will be worth enduring for the sake of the long periods of happiness which is to follow. What will the present chaos lead to? How will it all end? It can only end in one way. Mankind will be sick of it all. Men will be sick of wanting and sick of fighting out of hatred. Greed and hatred will reach such intensity that everyone will become weary of them. The way out of the deadlock will be found through selflessness. The only alternative which can bring a solution will be to stop hating and to love, to stop wanting and to give, to stop dominating and to serve. Great suffering awakens great understanding. Supreme suffering fulfills its purpose and yields its true significance when it awakens exhausted. And yields its true significance when it awakens exhausted humanity and stirs within it a genuine longing for real understanding. Unprecedented suffering leads to unprecedented spiritual growth. It contributes to the construction of life on the unshakable foundation of the truth. It is now high time that universal suffering should hasten humanity to the turning point in its spiritual history. It is now high time that the very agonies of our time should become a medium for bringing a real understanding of human relationship. It is now high time for humanity to face squarely the true causes of the catastrophe which has overtaken it. It is now high time to seek a new experience of reality. To know that life is real and eternal is to inherit unfading bliss. It is time that men had this realization by being unified with their own selves. Through unification with the higher self, man perceives the infinite self in all selves. He becomes free by outgrowing and discarding the limitations of the ego life. The individual soul has to realize with full consciousness its identity with the universal soul. Men shall reorient life in the light of this ancient truth, and they will readjust their attitude towards their neighbors in everyday life. To perceive the spiritual value of oneness is to promote real unity and cooperation. Brotherhood then becomes a spontaneous outcome of true perception. The new life, which is based upon spiritual understanding, is an affirmation of the truth. It is not something which belongs to utopia, but is completely practical. Now that humanity is thrown into the fire of bloody conflicts, through immense anguish, it is experiencing the utter instability and futility of the life which is based upon purely material conceptions. The hour is near when men, in their eager longing for real happiness, will seek its true source. The time is also ripe when men will ardently seek to contract the embodiment of truth in the form of a God-man, through whom they can be inspired and lifted into spiritual understanding. They will accept the guidance which comes from divine authority. Only the outpouring of divine love can bring about spiritual awakening. In this critical time of universal suffering, men are becoming ready to turn towards their higher self and to fulfill the will of God. Divine love will perform the supreme miracle of bringing God into the hearts of men and of getting them established in lasting and true happiness. It will satisfy the greatest need and longing of mankind. Divine love will make men selfless and helpful in their mutual relations, and it will bring about the final solution of all problems. The new brotherhood on earth shall be a fulfilled fact, and nations will be united in the fraternity of love and truth. My existence is for this love and this truth. To suffering humanity, I say, have hope. I have come to help you in surrendering yourself to the course of God and in accepting His grace of love and truth. I have come to help you in winning the one victory of all victories, to win yourself. So, any comments? Any early comments so far? I'll just finish this presentation. We can have a discussion. But any immediate comments? I thought I'll just read it because it's actually a beautifully written section piece.
Continue, Kiran. In the end only we'll talk. Continue.
Okay, continue. So the next thing I just reflected on this, and it's very well written. It's also important, I think, to read this in the context of the time in which it was written. But it also feels relevant to our current times. But you also look at the 70 years since, actually more than 70 years, 80 years since World War II. A lot of this is actually played out, arguably, right? So one may wonder whether the world is getting worse or has it gotten better? And I'll share some information later on that very question. But before that, there's a parallel in the Bhagavad Gita, verse 7 and 8 in chapter 3. This is the Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bharata. So those two verses. So anybody wants to read this with good Sanskrit pronunciation, please. Ravimai, can you read this? I don't want to put you on the spot. If you're comfortable reading it,
I can read Telugu, but unfortunately English.
This sloka andariki telusu. Everybody knows this.
Yeah.
Very famous sloka.
Okay, everyone knows this slokam. So basically, what the sloka means, these two slokams mean, is any age or era, whenever there is a loss of dharma, then I come. When the inequality increases, then I come to protect man, to destroy the wicked, and to re-establish dharma. I'm born in the age or era. So sorry, small typo there. So then this is just an extract. Amma sent this morning. I just added this, God of science. So often, when you think of a travail of the new world order, I think Baba's, that particular section is very relevant to the times we live in. So if we zoom out in time, we're actually still in a very similar time. It has seen great technological advents in the last century. Even in the last 20 years, the world is so different than it was before. So if you look at it, there is an overlap of science and God. Actually, there's an Einstein quote that I was wanting to put, but I think Einstein says that when science ends, God begins, right? So there's science and God are one. And I have not read this book, but Amma suggested this, so I just added this. Many of you may have read it, obviously. I won't read the text there, but there is a confluence of God and science in the modern era that is relevant. Just moving on, I picked up some news. There is actually, if you ask the question, is there more death in the world or is there less death? Are we living in a more peaceful time or are we living in a more chaotic time? It feels more chaotic. I don't know what you feel, but if you look at the social media news, I think it feels very chaotic. There's a lot of noise, a lot of information. The same information gets amplified through a lot of social media and news propagation. But if you actually look at the data and the number of deaths, and this is a chart that it's actually a UN-sponsored piece of work that did some study and looked at the number of deaths per 100,000 people, and actually it is at one of the lowest levels of all times known, right, in terms of estimation. So it's also a time where humanity has seen great progress of science, technology, commerce. There's a lot of wealth. There's a lot of abundance in the world. So maybe I think the man's battles and man's wars are not with other men, but it's with himself, right? So I think that becomes very relevant in Open Baba's teachings and all spiritual teachings. I don't mean religion, but spiritual teachings. And so just a question, I just thought I'd put a thought-provoking question for all of you. So what is man's next travail? What is the next travail in the 21st century? Just some images to spur some thought. Anybody recognize what is on the left-hand side most picture?
Yeah, Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, Myrtle Beach. So I just took that and I found this quote interesting, right? The man is the most insane of species. He worships invisible God and destroys a visible nature. Unaware the nature he's destroying is the God he's worshipping. Anyway, so I think that will be the challenge of the 21st century amongst others. But that was the last slide. I don't have any more material, but that's it. So let me end there. Jai Baba, thank you. I think it's a very pertinent chapter.
కిరణ్ అది చదువు నేను గాడ్ ఆఫ్ సైన్స్ ఇట్ ఈస్ చాలా బాగుంది చిన్న పేరా చదివే చదువు
లాస్ట్ స్లైడ్
గాడ్ ఆఫ్ సైన్స్ ది చిన్న పేరా ఉంచుడు రీడ్ దట్
Okay, since time immemorial,
Baba's words read it.
Since time immemorial, the avatar has come into our midst. The divine act repeated itself with the appearance of Meher Baba. However, unlike previous advents, the ancient one had the products of the modern world at his disposal for his auspicious and redemptive work. Meher Baba was able to employ cars, trains, buses, ships, and planes for transportation purposes, telegrams to commute instantly, and loudspeakers to transmit his message to large crowds. Photography and film preserved his images and was enlisted as a medium for his work. Gramophones were used to play music, and radio conveyed events and programs of the day to his listening ear. Besides these, many other sciences were utilized throughout the courses of his ministry. God of Science is divided into various sections. There is Meher Baba's words on science, as well as numerous incidents involving a technological component as a vital part of their narrative. And finally, several chapters detailing how Meher Baba's life historically synchronized with numerous scientific and technological endeavors. Alema?
Very good.
Okay. Jai Baba.
Kiran, can you go to the previous slide? The depth. అదొక్కసారి వెనక్కి వెళ్ళమా depth, you're showing the lowest depth.
Oh, depth slide. Sorry. Yeah. This one. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is from the 14th century data.
అదే కదా ఈ స్లైడ్
x-axis లో years, number of deaths on the.
This is the x-axis is the years. Y-axis is the rate of deaths per 100,000 people. So this is the frequency of death count, number of people who are dying per 100,000 deaths.
The whole world, లేకపోతే ఏంటి US?
This is the whole world on a logarithmic scale.
ఇది
Is it natural deaths also, or only?
No. This is just death from conflicts. This is not natural deaths.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
All kinds of conflicts, military, civilian conflicts. So it's almost a way of saying unnatural deaths. There's actually more data on this website, Pawan, which shows the decline of conflict and death in humanity over the last 2 millennia.
So all the Spanish flu, coronavirus, and all those deaths are also included here, or not? Only war?
Deaths are not mine. Those deaths are not included. This is death from conflict and from war and from human conflict.
I see.
కానీ వాట్ ఐ మీన్ ఇస్ spontaneous or any deaths all have decreased over the last century with the advent of capitalism. And second thing is you are more likely to die of suicide rather than any terrorist war. మనం ఈ ఏజ్ లో ఉండి మనం టెర్రరిస్ట్ వాళ్ళ చచ్చిపోయామని అనుకుంటున్నాం కానీ even the number of COVID deaths is far, far less than what Spanish flu has taken toll.
Correct. Actually,
So,
if anybody is interested, if you go to this thing called ourworldinddata.org, it shows all this information that, including what Gautam is saying. So the very, very, very powerful point. If you think about it, the number of deaths from suicide or human self-inflicted death is much higher.
What is that? What is the website called? The World on?
Our World in Data.
Okay.
Actually, the whole gist of data, Sapiens అనే book లో ఒకటి ఉంది. Sapiens is Harari novel. అది ఎంత బ్యూటిఫుల్ గా చేశాడంటే he has given a very good depth. చెప్పాలంటే మోడర్న్ డే బైబిల్ లాంటిది, మోడర్న్ డే స్పిరిచువల్ బుక్.
అదేం బుక్ పేరు ఏం పేరు?
Sapiens.
Sapiens.
Spell that.
Sapiens. Humans.
Sapiens.
Sapiens. SAPIENS. అది మొత్తం చదవండి చిన్న. అది ట్రిలజీ అన్నమాట, బుక్ ట్రిలజీ.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
So, shall we? You want to take over?
Yeah. Okay. Good presentation, Kiran. A lot of content and slightly, I won't call it complex content, but I would say a lot of text and matter. So I guess takes a little time to digest all the information you presented. So I will start. This time I will start with Amma. Okay, Amma, why don't you give some of your thoughts and views and feedback? Geeta garu.
I will tell you. కొంచెం చెప్పంటావా? Okay.
But we are a smaller group, so don't worry. If you get some other thought later, you get a special permission. Don't worry.
According to the travails New Humanity prakaram, the root cause of all the problem is selfishness అన్నారు. Okay. ఇప్పుడు మనం present situation కూడా we are going through this corona thing, that presidential election, here lot of elections, how we are seeing, how selfish everybody for their own benefit కోసం ఎలా పోట్లాడుకుంటున్నారు, ఇదంతా కళ్ళారా చూస్తున్నాం. ఓకే, ఏంటంటే ఈ క్రిటికల్ ఇన్ ఆల్ గ్రేట్ క్రిటికల్ పీరియడ్స్ ఆఫ్ హ్యూమన్ హిస్టరీ, హ్యూమానిటీ ఈస్ గోయింగ్ త్రూ ఏ ఆగనైజింగ్ ట్రవైల్ ఆఫ్ స్పిరిచువల్ రీబర్త్ అన్నారు. Great forces of destruction seem to be dominant at the moment, but constructive and creative forces that will redeem humanity are also being released through several channels. మనకు కనపడటం లేదు. ఓకే, దీంట్లో బ్యూటిఫుల్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇచ్చారు. సపోజ్ ఇన్ ఏ వెల్ we draw all the water, okay, but slowly అలా స్ప్రింగ్స్ వస్తూ ఉంటాయి అన్నమాట. అలాగా ఇప్పుడుండే పరిస్థితుల్లో ఈవెన్ పాజిటివ్ ఇవి కూడా they are coming, they are working through several unknown channels. This is all God's plan only. Okay, ఇప్పుడు what Baba says, దుర్యోధనుడిని ఇటు ధర్మరాజుడు కృష్ణుడే అన్ని ప్లాన్ చేశారు. సో పప్పెట్స్ లాగా ఇది జరుగుతుంది. దిస్ ఈజ్ నెసెసరీ, సఫరింగ్ ఈజ్ సైన్ ఆఫ్ కంపాషన్ అని చెప్పారు. ఓకే, తర్వాత ఏమో దీని తర్వాత ఎలాగా ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టివ్ ఫోర్సెస్ విల్ వర్క్ అనేది మనకి ఇప్పుడు తెలియకపోవచ్చు. ఇప్పుడు మనం పీక్ ఆఫ్ సఫరింగ్ అంటే కోవిడ్, మళ్ళీ కేసెస్ ఎక్కువైపోయినాయి, తగ్గిపోయినాయి అని అన్నారు, మళ్ళీ అగైన్ మోర్ ఎక్కువ అవుతున్నాయి అని చెప్తున్నారు. దీనికి బాబా చెప్పిందే, ప్రెగ్నెంట్ ఉమెన్ అండర్గో ద పెయిన్స్ ఈ బేబీ పుట్టగానే ఎలాగా అవుతుందో అలాగా గుడ్ టైమ్ విల్ కమ్. దానికోసం ఇదంతా ఈ కయాస్ అంతా క్రియేట్ చేసింది అనమాట. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ వాట్ ఇందాక కిరణ్ చదవమన్నాను. ఏంటంటే బాబా ఆల్ఫబెట్ వర్డ్ ఇట్ లెడ్ టు దట్ కంప్యూటర్స్ నౌ హీ put that foundation for that digital వీటికి కానీ ఇవన్నీ లేటెస్ట్ ఎక్విప్మెంట్ ఆయన ఫౌండేషన్ వేయబట్టి అది అప్పుడు 38-39లో బిగ్గెస్ట్ సెకండ్ వరల్డ్ వార్, 5 years. ఫస్ట్ వరల్డ్ వార్ is happened under the supervision of Shri Sai Baba. 1939 నుంచి 45లో UN వార్ స్టార్ట్ అయినప్పుడు కదా, ఇదంతా ఒక పీస్ఫుల్ గా అయ్యింది. 39 నుంచి 45 వరకు. 45లో యునైటెడ్ నేషన్స్ ఆర్గనైజేషన్ వచ్చింది. సో అది దిస్ ఆల్సో సెకండ్ వరల్డ్ వార్ హ్యాపెండ్ అండర్ ది సూపర్విజన్ ఆఫ్ మెహర్ బాబా అని క్లియర్ గా చెప్పారు డిస్కోర్సెస్ లోనే. సో దిస్ నౌ ఇన్ ద present chaos also, after some time thing we will going to see 21. Kiran question said కదా, 21 we may see good times. Okay, lot of people are suffering, we are seeing lack of jobs and the political people చూస్తున్నాము, presidential elections నే చూస్తున్నాము. is not accepting the defeat last వరకు ఏంటి, what is the self interest, they don't want to leave that power. Okay, that is my opinion. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, very good points you shared, very nice. Kiran, just before we progress this, I give somebody else a turn. If you could summarize, what do you think are the top 3 points related to this particular talk? What would those top 3 points be? In a very simple words. Yeah.
In simple words, what Baba is saying is that the world is going through a storm, right? A chaotic time. There is a lot of conflict in the world that has arisen out of selfishness and greed. But that very conflict will lead to a frustration of man with the status quo of that time. That will lead to man wanting to get out of it. The suffering will want to, it's a laborious process that it's going through, that man will want to get out of it. And in getting out of it, there will be a great realization of spiritual truth, of the goodness. And so that's where the analogy of childbirth and labor comes in, right? So there is labor involved, there's a travail involved in a woman during pregnancy, right? There's a lot of pain, but thereafter there is some goodness that comes out of the end of it. And so what Baba says is through this process, there is some great good that's going to come out of it, and that good will be triggered by a lot of spiritual realization and a lot of love. So that is sort of the essence of it. The reason I put the context, etc., I was reading the words and I was thinking, okay, it was very specifically written in the book, is that this was written during 1941-42. It was precisely during World War II. And how much, like Amma said, right after World War II, UN was formed. It was actually, there was some of the greatest boom in the world over, economic boom, etc., happened right after that, right? There was also a period of thing between that time and the Vietnam War. There was actually a lot of, you can call it human consciousness, but there was a lot of thing in the US as well, right? If you take that period, or the world, Europe, the East. So there's a lot of, anyway, so those are the 3 points, Pawan, but I'm just rambling on after that, yeah.
Okay. That gives a good